So I must say, what a lovely film. I was reminded of a very old film, Haqiqat,
Haqiqat,
where,
yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
In
which was,
fact, if I'm not mistaken, there's even a photo from Haqiqat which is used in the film to show Dharamji as a younger officer. Or if I'm not mistaken, it's from Haqiqat or from another army war film which he had done in the 60s when he was a younger man. But Haqiqat is one of my favorite films as well, and Sriram sir is also a huge fan of Haqiqat and has a poster of Haqiqat which Dharamji signed, in fact, in his office. And also, he's a big fan of both Chetan Anand and Vijay Anand. I think they're both filmmaking heroes for Sriram sir, and really, really like. So it's continuing a wonderful tradition of films like Hakikat and the beautiful films that Dharamji was a part of that we love so much.
because a war film that talks about peace. I feel that any
Yeah.
war film is not a good film unless it talks about the costs we pay. Yeah.
Yes, then
Was
it's a
that the
it's
primary attraction for you for this role?
yes, the primary attraction for me was the opportunity to work with Sriram Raghavan sir and to be a part of such a beautiful story. And of course, the fact that it was a film with such a beautiful theme. And I wouldn't call it a message because art should ideally not have a message. It should be more than that. It should, because otherwise it runs the risk of becoming didactic, you know. And I think it's very, the theme is one of humanity. It's a humane film, it's a kind film, and it's a film with its heart in the right place. And that for me was the true like icing on the cake, as it were. That this film also happens to say something which I believe in very firmly and strongly, and I just feel honored to have been a part of it.
How was it to sort of deal with tanks? And was it like being in a toy store, or was it a very complicated machine to understand? How was it for you?
I think it was a bit of both. It was a very complicated machine to understand, and also at the same time it was kind of like being in a toy store, because for us it's quite kind of like when we were there's always been a fascination with action films since I was a kid, and to be a part of one was truly a dream come true. But also it did come with a great deal of responsibility in understanding the mechanics and the nuts and bolts of how a tank operates. And I think one of the most important things for us was we went to Ahmednagar. I went to Ahmed. Actually, I joined the film in August of 2024, and they had already been shooting. So before that, Agastya and all had done a very comprehensive and full-fledged NDA training, which is, let me tell you, not an easy task at all. It was a very, very difficult thing, and I have immense respect for the fact that Agastya and Kailash and Aryan and some of the younger actors did actually go through a proper full-fledged NDA training. It's something that tests the endurance of an individual, and that is the purpose of it. But you know what? When I joined the project in August of 2024, the first thing we did was to go to Ahmednagar, which is where the Armored Corps resides. And in Ahmednagar, we did, I would say I did maybe like 1/4 or 1/5 of what Agastya and all did in terms of the NDA training. I did a very basic kind of training. It was myself and the tank crew, the actors who played the members of the tank crew. We basically did we did PT drills, march past, a lot of military activities, also a radio communication class, understanding how the nuts and bolts of a tank works. Also, this thing called a tank simulator, which is a sort of a computerized mechanism by which you can understand how to fire a tank, how to aim, how to reload, how to shoot again, these kinds of various things. And also, we also got to drive a real tank, which was one of the most surreal experiences. Let me tell you, when I was driving the real tank, I was literally pinching myself to see if this is a dream or if it's actually happening. Because, and also at the end of it, after that, we were all joking to ourselves that we're going to go back to Bombay and brag to all of our friends that we drove a real tank. Like, how many people has anyone met that has driven a real tank? And so it was a truly illuminating experience, the tank training, and also trying to understand the nuts and bolts of a tank, and trying to make the tank an extension of one's own body. And they should have had a lived in quality. It should have been that basically it should have seemed as if this is a mechanism which I operate every single day, and I'm so fluent and comfortable in it that it literally is like an extension of my body. The tank, the same way a sailor, the kind of relationship a sailor would have with his sailing vessel, with a boat or a ship, the same way I sort of looked at the tank in a similar kind of way.
Your character is a bit of a badass, I would say, but a pragmatic badass, unlike
Yes.
Agastya's more greenhorn.
Yeah.
So, how fun was it to play? You get to say some of the coolest dialogues about Kismet and all. How fun was that, Vivan, for
It
you?
was it was a lot of fun. It was a great deal of fun, and it was also you know what? Actually, I based the character a great deal of it on my father's older brother, General Zamiruddin Shah, who actually fought in the Battle of Longewala, and he in real life is quite a badass.
Wow.
He's a very he's a very dynamic personality, and I really sort of drew on that a
Hmm.
great deal. And also the real life Captain Vijendra Malhotra, who himself was a badass and an extraordinarily charismatic and very interesting and cool person. You know, he is someone who really,
Hmm.
I never, of course, got to meet him, unfortunately, but I studied his photographs.
Hmm.
I studied the
Hmm.
information that I received about him in the research. And let me tell you, there was a great deal of information, a great deal of very interesting anecdotes, things about him, which gave me a lot of insight into who he was as a character and how to play him, you know.
Hmm.
I've tried my best to authentically depict him in as truthful and honest a way as possible. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to do 100% accurate job. That is, I think, the job of an artist is to, in a sense, fill in the blanks of what one doesn't know with the imagination, with the observation, with one's learnings, and with the craft and art of acting. I think that's our duty as actors. But really, as you said, this is the
Hmm.
first time I've really got to play a sort of badass kind of character in that sense, a really dynamic and
Hmm.
smart and cool kind of figure. And that for me was
Hmm.
a real blessing. That was one of the great joys of playing Captain Vijay
Hmm.
Malhotra.
Your scenes are set in the army. You didn't get to meet Dharmendra ji, or did you get to meet him on sets?
No, unfortunately, I didn't get to meet him because firstly, our storylines didn't intersect. They almost took
Yeah,
place
yeah,
in
yeah.
two parallel timelines, two different timelines in a sense. And it's one
Hmm.
of the great regrets of my life that I didn't get to meet Dharamji, who's one of my heroes and who's also a hero for my father
Hmm.
because my father grew up watching his films in the early 60s from Haqiqat and Phool or Patthar and so many of those
Hmm.
wonderful films of the early 60s. Dharamji, to my father, was
Hmm.
really a sort of Herculean figure, a screen idol, as it were.
Your parents went and watched the movie. What was their reaction? Because
They really, really loved it. They were very proud of my work in it, my participation in it, and they liked that I played a different kind of character, and they really loved the film. They loved what the film is saying,
Hmm.
and the theme of the film, as I
Hmm.
had mentioned earlier, that you said it's an anti-war film. Essentially, it's a humane film. It's a kind film.
Hmm.
It's a thoughtful film, and that's what really touched their hearts very deeply about the film. Is that that it's really something that, and for my father to see Dharamji perform, especially that last scene, it hit him very emotionally. It was very cathartic.
Yeah, because it somehow also serves as a very nice goodbye to Dharamji. We didn't know that he's going to.
Exactly. In
Yeah.
fact, yeah, and you know what? His last lines in the film and his last lines in film on film are Rabbarak,
Yeah.
Rabbarak. So that's a really, really powerful kind of. That was really, really very moving. I can't tell you that it was an extraordinarily emotional experience. I watched the film again last night with Sriram sir and everyone. We had just gone, and every time I see it, I see new things in the film. And I'm
Hmm.
affected by it emotionally each and every time.
How lovely. How does Sriramji finds this film? Because it was completely out of his comfort zone.
Ma'am, it's very interesting. A lot of people feel that it is a departure for Sriram sir, but let me tell you why it's not. Because the
Yeah.
film noir filmmakers, the filmmakers of the 50s and 60s, and I'm not just talking about our filmmakers like Vijay Anand and Chetan Anand, I'm saying in the West,
Hmm.
the great filmmakers of the classical period in the 50s and 60s
Hmm.
who made film noirs, whether it be people like
Hmm.
Samuel Fuller, Anthony Mann, Don Siegel, Robert Aldrich, Sam Peckinpah, John Sturges, who made The Great Escape and The Magnificent Seven. These filmmakers
Yeah,
were
yeah.
all, they made film noirs, which are the gangster crime films of the chiaroscuro
Hmm.
lighting and the shadows and the hats and that sort of that imagery, that iconography, which Sriram Sir has drawn upon so much in his beautiful work and which so means so much to Sriram Sir. These filmmakers were the architects of the genre of film noir. And film noir is a genre which is primarily associated with Sriram Sir in our cinema. Now, those filmmakers, ma'am, all of the
Hmm.
ones that I mentioned, they were all World War II combat veterans. And
Wow.
so they made film noirs, they made crime films, they made gangster films, they made westerns, and they also all made war films. So in
Hmm.
a sense, Sriram sir, it's continuing on a beautiful tradition of filmmakers.
Hmm.
And also, so I don't look at it as a departure as much as of a logical extension to his filmography.
It is, like you said, a very kind film, very heartwarming film,
Yeah.
which you moved to tears watching this film. So, what was the discussion like?
The discussion was,
And
we
what
were
are the
talking,
new things that you discovered in the film?
every time I
Yeah.
see it, I discover new things in Agastya's performance. The subtlety and the really
Yeah.
the finely crafted performance that he's given. Same with Jaideep Elavat's performance, which is such an
Hmm.
extraordinary performance, a performance of immense depth and wisdom. You know, it's really the kind of performance
Hmm. Hmm.
that future generations will study. Acting students will really study. Jaideep sir's
Hmm.
face is like a landscape.
Hmm.
You know, it reminds me of the great faces of cinema, of
Hmm.
Humphrey Bogart, of Om Puri, faces which tell a story.
Hmm.
You know, and
Hmm.
and Dharamji's performance, especially his delivery of those lines towards the end and last scene. Oh my God, the rumble in his voice, the look in his eyes,
Hmm.
so many things. And I
Hmm.
especially also, ma'am, really love the fact that this is an action film in which the action
Hmm.
does not bombard the viewer. You know, there's a tendency in
Yeah.
the contemporary cinema for action, the way it's cut and edited and shot, to be a sort of sensory overload.
Hmm.
You know, I think it's probably the
Yes.
influence of the Marvel films and the action films of Hollywood, where they really kind of bombard the viewer with a sort of sensory barrage of images and sounds and actions and things. You know, and out here the action is so artfully choreographed. You know, it's so every
Hmm.
single bullet hit, every single wound, every single blood splatter, every single explosion, every single
Hmm.
fighter falling has a dramatic weight and a dramatic meaning and a dramatic purpose. It's not just there for
Hmm.
effect. It's I think very
That's right.
sophisticated filmmaking.
Hmm. Actually, we don't trust the audience to sit in silence anymore, which is what this film
Exactly.
does.
Exactly.
So, Vivan, having done this film, we see you in very different kind of movies. I mean, you do work selectively. What kind of roles you want to do going forward? And what are your learnings? Like you said, collaborating with Sriram Ragan, you have worked with some of the best filmmakers, Vishal Bhardwaj and Kashyap, and this. So, what are your learnings, and what are the kind of films you're looking forward to?
You know, there's a famous saying that the actor does not always select the films select the actor. So
True.
certainly there are certain kinds of films that I do want to do, but I'm not presumptuous enough to think that I might get those films. So I would just like to do
I
roles
doubt
with
that. Maybe the universe, like, उसके ना manifestation की power.
well, you know, this whole manifestation craze that's taken the world by storm, ma'am,
I
I don't
know.
know what to make of it.
We're
It's
too cynical
almost,
for it, but
no, I'm not cynical. It's just that I feel that it's very much akin to prayer. That the whole
yeah.
business of manifestation is sort of like praying in a sense. It's kind of what
Mm.
I used to do as a kid. That, oh, I pray that I get good marks in my exams, or I pray that I make it to the football team, or I pray that I get into the college that I really want to, that sort of thing. So I don't know what to make of it. It's a little beyond my depth. I personally just believe in logic and rationality, and I don't
Yeah.
necessarily believe in this manifestation business. I am someone of the opinion that one's efforts and one's actions should count more than one's sort of so-called
Mm.
manifestations, right? So,
Mm.
but you know, ma'am, really, I do want to do roles with a certain kind of dynamism. I feel with a certain
Mm.
kind of a sense of. I've been very one of the things I'm very grateful for. See, I've done a lot of roles in films which have not been very interesting, and I've also done roles which have been very interesting. And what I find very interesting about the roles that I've gotten a chance to do are that a lot of the roles they capture different milieus or geographical subcultures or regions of our country and dialects. I'm someone who's a
Mm.
student of dialects and
Mm.
linguistics. So I have been fortunate that I've got a chance to do the Bombaya dialect, which is my dialect, the dialect I have grown up with. And I'd certainly
Mm.
love to do more roles in that vein because that's something I'd be able to bring a measure of authenticity to. But I've also been very fortunate that I've also had the opportunity to do the Bihari dialect in a film like Court
Mm.
or the
Mm.
Awadhi dialect, which was in my last release in Galiyon Mein. And that for me was a fascinating experience. It really made me understand our own country and our own culture in a deeper way. When I spent 2 months in Bihar and I spoke in that language, in that dialect, I feel that I got a deeper understanding of what makes our country. The various the sort of the texture of our country, the texture of Bihar in itself. You know, and same thing with UP, with the Awadhi dialect, because UP, although हालांकि मैं बम्बई का पला बड़ा हूँ, UP खूनो खून में गूंजता है, because my father's from UP. So I have observed that dialect a great deal within my own family, and also I did boarding school up north, so I've met those kinds of characters. So I hope, man, that I get to do different kinds of dialects, represent different kinds of regions. There's certain dialects which I'm not very familiar and fluent with. Like, for instance, if I had to play a Delhi boy, I don't think I'd do a very good job because I don't know that culture very well. I don't know that dialect and that lingo very well. If I had to play a Punjabi boy, I don't know if I'd be able to do it very well because I don't. Although I am one fourth Punjabi, my mother is half Punjabi, but I just don't have a personal knowledge of that culture and I haven't spent enough time in that milieu to be able to nail that dialect the same way that I'd be able to nail a Bombaya dialect because that is the language of my mohalla, of my friends and my streets. So it's very interesting. I've always found that there's a very interesting relationship between an actor and the geographical region from which they originate. You know.
Wow. Huh. So you said you are a language student. Is it something of a fascination for you, or it is something
Absolutely.
that you've studied?
Well,
Oh,
it's
okay.
something that I have not really formally studied. It is something that is a fascination to me. I think I am formally, basically by education, by my academic background, and I'm basically a historian because I was, I studied, I did a course in history. I did an MA in history and English literature. So that by my academic training, those are the regions of my interest and also my learning. But I never did a formal course in linguistics, but certainly working with my parents, I developed a decent grasp over Urdu,
Yeah.
and I can understand Marathi and Gujarati. But also, ma'am, a lot of the learning has been from observation, from the streets actually, from my friends. My understanding of the Bombaya dialect and my understanding of Maharashtrian culture does come from my everyday life, as it were.
You said it was an action film. So I am deducing that you have been a big action movie buff as a fan. So what are the movies that like really that have sort of brought that fascination in you?
One of them is The Wild Bunch. And that film is actually referenced in Ikkis when I think Agastya and his friends are going to the theater to watch a movie. They check in the newspaper, in the columns, and the classified columns. In the old days, films used to be, the timings used to be there in the newspaper. Before Book My Show and all that. I remember in
Yeah,
my
yeah.
childhood, it used to be like that. So they refer to The Wild Bunch. The Wild Bunch is, in my opinion, the greatest action film ever made because it is the film which made action filmmaking into an art form. It showed what you could do with slow motion, what you could do with different frame rates, what you could do with the choreography of action itself. That film, Once Upon a Time in the West, which is the great culmination of the Sergio Leone spaghetti westerns with Clint Eastwood, starting with Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which of course everyone loves, the famous tune.
Yes.
And then he made a film called Once Upon a Time in the West with Charles Bronson and Henry Fonda, and that is, I think, one of the greatest achievements of filmmaking. For me, that's like one of it's almost like the Sistine Chapel of cinema. That film, it's a towering achievement. Then the classic war films like The Guns of Navarone, Dirty Dozen, Where Eagles Dare, and so many other films. The Great Escape, The Magnificent Seven, which is another lovely western, and also some of the older war films. The filmmakers, I would just implore the audience, to the viewers, to watch some of the films of the filmmakers that I had mentioned, like Samuel Fuller, who was a war veteran himself and who made a lot of very interesting war films. He made a film called The Steel Helmet, Merrill's Marauders, China Gate, which is not the Rajkumar Santoshi China Gate. This is this is
I
another China
understand.
Gate,
Yeah.
and so many other one, the Crimson Kimono film noirs he made. But his action films and his facility with action was particularly interesting. Don Siegel, his facility with action. Sam Peckinpah, who made The Wild Bunch, was the first person. Actually, I think he was one of the first filmmakers to show blood on screen in a rather graphic kind of way. His films were very violent for their time. But Don Siegel, Sam Peckinpah, these are all the filmmakers that I am a real student of, whose films that I've studied and really and and been influenced by also.
You had a great connection with Agastya, and
With
of course
Agastya, yeah.
Sikandar, and there is Rahul.
Rahul
All four
Dev,
of you
so
stand
many
out.
people.
Hmm.
Kailash, Aryan, wonderful bunch of young actors. Also, all the tank crew. The tank crew, the
Hmm.
actors who were part of the tank crew were so committed to their. Oh my God, their dedication to their roles was
Hmm.
truly phenomenal. I think it's an oversight on my part that I have not really been able to mention and pay adequate tribute to the young actors that played our tank crew. Ma'am, they had some of the toughest jobs imaginable because they also had
Hmm.
very small roles. But the hard
Hmm.
work that they put in, like, I'll give you a
Hmm.
small example. Like, for instance, a tank crew member might not always be shown. It might not always be shown in a shot because they're inside the container of the tank. Unlike me, who's the
Hmm.
tank commander who gets to pop out of the cupola and be seen by the camera. But ma'am, there's so many people who are. There was 3 or 4 tank crew members, actors, who were inside
Hmm.
the tank at all times, whether or not they were in the shot, whether they were going to be visible or not. And that
Hmm.
was truly, I can't tell you, the devotion to the craft as an actor, that is just awe inspiring. The way the tank
Hmm.
crew members, and sometimes I tell them, yeah, guys, you don't need to be there, just y'all can go and relax because y'all are not going to be seen in the shot. But they'll be like, no, we want to be there. This is their dedication to the craft. Yeah, isn't that
Hmm.
amazing? And even shots
Yeah.
where they were not visible, they would still be there inside the tank, just
Hmm.
because they were inhabiting their characters and their duties so fully.
Was the weather kind to you guys when you were shooting in tanks? Was there like or not? Was it winters or
It was
summer?
quite hot. Surprisingly, October in Amritsar actually gets quite warm, and certainly,
Oh,
there's times when you're on the tank, you feel like you're a tandoori chicken being roasted on the metal.
oh God, yeah, that's true.
But that's all part of the bargain. Yeah, that's why that's part of our job as an actor. You know,
Hmm.
is to endure certain physical hardships, and that makes one a tougher human being. It's all for the better.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. So, Vivan, after this film, what else you're doing? You are also involved with your parents' theatre group, I
Yes,
guess.
yes,
Yes.
very much so,
So,
very much so. I'm very an integral part of my parents' theatre group, and I have been since I was a child. And so
hmm.
there's a lot of work on that front, which I continue to do all the time, which I've always done. There's also Sudhir Mishraji's show called Summer of '76, which I think is going to come out in Feb or March of this year. And
Wow.
as of now, ma'am, these are the two things that I'm really looking forward to: theatre and Sudhir Sir's web series. And
So
right now, I'm also currently
you are
shooting for something which I can't actually, it's not been
no, no, I
announced
understand.
formally, so I can't really disclose that. But that's also been going on at the same time. I'm almost wrapping that up. So I'll be able to share more news about that once that is made official.
Oh, lovely. So, as a history student, you are really getting to go back in history, and
Absolutely,
that must
ma'am.
be
I've
lovely for
actually
you to
covered
read.
I've covered most periods of history. In Suitable Boy, I did 1950s. In Bombay Velvet, I did 1960s. In Ikkis and Sudhir Sir's show, I've done 1970s. In Saatpur Maaf, I did 1980s. Then in one
Wow.
incomplete gangster film, I did 1990s. And of course, 2000 and beyond, to all of us have done. so,
Ah, that's true.
so
Thank you
I
so much,
managed to cover
Vivaan.
post-independence India pretty comprehensively. Let's see. I hope I get to play some roles of olden times.